Welcome to our series exploring the enigmatic realm of unexplained deaths and mysteries. Join us as we delve into perplexing cases that defy conventional understanding, where each clue raises more questions. From baffling disappearances to puzzling crime scenes, prepare to uncover the secrets behind these haunting mysteries.
On a fateful day, the 9th of April in the year 1483, Edward IV, King of England, succumbed to the inexorable grip of death, leaving behind a nation and two sons, 12-year-old Edward and 9-year-old Richard. However, the tale takes a dark turn as Richard, Duke of Gloucester, soon sheds his protective guise to reveal a far more sinister ambition. Upon their arrival in London, the princes were ensconced in the Tower of London, a customary residence for royalty awaiting their crowning. Yet within those ancient, foreboding walls, Richard had the boys declared illegitimate, thereby clearing his path to the throne, which he seized for himself, becoming the infamous Richard III. The young princes were never seen again. The shadows of history and the pen of Shakespeare have long suggested that Richard ordered the murder of his nephews. Yet, despite the pervasive suspicion, no concrete evidence has emerged, no confessions uttered, no damning proof presented. The plot thickens further still when, after Richard III's death in battle against Henry VII, a new claimant emerged from the mists of obscurity. Arriving in England, a man known as Perkin Warbeck claimed to be none other than Richard of Shrewsbury, the younger of the lost princes. He professed that his elder brother had been slain, but he himself had been spared and exiled, bound by a vow of silence. Protected by the loyalists of Edward IV, he had now returned to claim his birthright. Warbeck's tale garnered the support of several European monarchs, and in 1495 he landed in Kent, ready to stake his claim. However, Henry VII, resolute and determined, forced him to flee to Scotland, where James IV lent him men and arms for a renewed attempt. His promises of lowered taxes won him considerable popular support, yet he was defeated once more by Henry VII. Imprisoned in the very Tower of London from which he claimed to have escaped, Warbeck soon confessed to being an impostor. Nevertheless, his tale did not end there. He managed to escape once more, reiterating his claim to the throne. This final defiance led to his execution. Centuries later, the enigmatic figure of Perkin Warbeck would capture the imagination of Mary Shelley, who immortalized him in her novel, thereby securing his grim place in the annals of English history. And what of the unfortunate princes? On the 17th of July, 1674, workmen at the Tower of London unearthed a wooden box containing two small human skeletons, swathed in velvet, perhaps indicating royal blood. The bones were reinterred at Westminster Abbey, with a monument erected in their honour. In 1933, a scientific analysis of the remains was conducted, but the results proved inconclusive. The bones, mingled with those of chickens and other animals, were incomplete, and the examination was far from exhaustive. Some have whispered of a reluctance to uncover the truth, another layer of intrigue in this storied mystery. In recent times, calls for a thorough re-examination of the remains have grown louder, especially in light of the successful identification of Richard III's bones beneath a municipal car park. Some believe it would be a fitting twist of fate to confirm that the princes lie in Westminster Abbey, while their suspected murderer was unearthed from such a humble resting place. Yet perhaps the true prince's bones rest beneath a stone marked Perkin Warbeck. Thus the shadows of history continue to cloak the fate of the princes in the tower, leaving us to ponder, speculate, and await the final unveiling of this centuries-old enigma.
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
On the morning of July 2, 1951, in the quiet town of St. Petersburg, Florida, the landlady of 67-year-old Mary Reeser noticed something peculiar. The doorknob to Mary's apartment was unusually hot. When repeated knocks failed to rouse her lodger, she contacted the police. They arrived swiftly, forced the door open, and what they found inside left them stunned. Mary Reeser's charred remains sat on an overstuffed easy chair. Part of her left foot, still encased in a slipper, protruded from the ashes. Her backbone, they noted grimly, had fused with the chair's upholstery. Among the ashes, her skull was found, astonishingly shrunken to the size of a teacup. The surrounding room was largely unscathed. The wallpaper bore cracks from the heat higher up, but lower down, the walls were pristine. A newspaper lay untouched beside the chair, and the sheets in her bedroom were clean and white. The scene defied all logic. Chief J.R. Reichart reached out to the FBI, writing to J. Edgar Hoover himself. "Dear Mr. Hoover," he began, "this fire is too puzzling for the small-town force to handle." He included samples from the apartment portions of the rug, rubble from the walls and floor, smoke residues, and pieces of the chair. The investigation, however, yielded no clear answers. It wasn't lightning, napalm, or a fireball. Ray guns, they said, did not exist. Theories ran wild, from freak lightning strikes to some high-tech new weapon. One man wrote to the local newspaper claiming, "I seen it happen before." As the story gripped the nation, one possibility lingered in the public's mind: spontaneous human combustion, SHC. Tales of SEC had persisted for centuries. Herman Melville, the author of, claimed to have witnessed it at sea, and Charles Dickens wrote about it in *Bleak House. In the 19th century, hundreds of cases were reported, often attributed to a debauched lifestyle, especially in overweight women. As recently as 2010, an Irish coroner had ruled a man's death as SHC. In Mary Reeser's case, the authorities considered her heavy smoking habit a likely factor. Scientists proposed the wick effect, where a body, once ignited, burns slowly, with body fat acting like candle wax and clothing serving as the wick. An intoxicated person might not react quickly enough to the growing heat. The FBI concluded that Mary might have dropped a cigarette on herself, slowly burning to death. Yet, dissenting voices remained. Wilton M. Krogman, an anthropologist from the University of Pennsylvania, doubted the explanation. There should have been more burning in the apartment, he argued. The debate over SHC and Mary Reeser's death persists to this day. Mary Reeser's family, however, accepted the FBI's findings. They believed her spirit lingered in the apartment. When visitors felt an inexplicable breeze, the family would smile and say, "That's Grandma. Don't worry, she's nice."
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
On a chilly Sunday morning, February 8, 1981, San Francisco's Golden Gate Park became the scene of a horrifying discovery. Leroy Carter Jr., a 29-year-old homeless man known to frequent the park, was found dead on the bench he had claimed as his nightly refuge. What made this crime scene particularly disturbing was not just the pool of blood surrounding Carter's sleeping bag, but the shocking nature of his demise. Carter's head had been severed from his body with surgical precision. The coroner would later note, the cut was very clean, like an expert did it. But the decapitation was only the beginning of this macabre tableau. Where Carter's head should have been, investigators found a chicken wing and kernels of corn forcibly inserted into the neck cavity. 50 yards from the gruesome scene, police discovered the carcass of a headless chicken, missing the same wing found with Carter's body. The initial police report was stark in its brevity. It appears the victim was sleeping in the bushes when person or persons unknown to us at this time came along and decapitated him. Faced with such an unusual and disturbing crime, the San Francisco Police Department turned to one of their own experts, Officer Sandy Gallant. Gallant had recently gained notoriety for her work on the Jim Jones case, investigating the infamous cult leader responsible for the Jonestown massacre in Guyana. This experience had led her to become something of an authority on cults and occult practices within the department. Her expertise would prove invaluable in unraveling the mystery surrounding Carter's death. Delving into her research, Gallant uncovered connections to the Palo Mayombe cult, a syncretic belief system that blended elements of Aztec blood rituals, Haitian voodoo, Catholicism, and in some cases, devil worship. Palo Mayombe was a branch of Santeria, an Afro-Caribbean religion with roots tracing back to Nigeria some 500 years ago. Brought to the Americas by enslaved Africans, these beliefs had evolved and adapted over centuries. While human sacrifice was not typically associated with Palo Mayombe, Gallant discovered historical incidents bearing an uncanny resemblance to Carter's decapitation. She presented her findings to the police department, emphasizing that understanding the motive behind the head's removal was crucial to solving the case. According to Gallant's research, the head, including the eyes, ears, and brain, would be used to create a potent ritualistic brew. This concoction would then be consumed by the practitioner over a 21-day period. Following this, the skull would be kept for another 21 days, during which time the priest might sleep near it and a ceremonial cauldron if deemed appropriate. On the 42nd day after the ritual began, tradition dictated that the remaining skull be returned to a location close to where it was initially taken, as a sacred act of completion. Despite the compelling nature of Gallant's theory, skepticism prevailed within the department. This was, after all, modern-day America, not some remote jungle where such primitive practices might be expected. As a result, traditional investigative methods took precedence, and Gallant's warnings went largely unheeded. The consequences of this decision became apparent on March 22, 1981, exactly 42 days after Carter's murder. True to Gallant's prediction, Carter's decomposed head was discovered near the original crime scene. Had officers been stationed there, as Gallant had suggested, they might have caught the perpetrator in the act of returning the Grisly trophy. The case of Leroy Carter Jr. remains unsolved to this day, a chilling reminder of the dark undercurrents that can exist even in the heart of a modern metropolis. It stands as a testament to the importance of considering unconventional perspectives in criminal investigations and the potential consequences of dismissing expert opinions that fall outside the mainstream. The story of Carter's murder continues to fascinate and disturb, serving as a grim footnote in San Francisco's history and a cautionary tale about the persistence of ancient shadowy practices in our contemporary world.
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
All right, imagine this. It's December 2016, and a CIA officer checks into the American Embassy's health office in Havana feeling nauseous, with a pounding headache and dizziness. Not long after, 2 more CIA officers show up with the same symptoms. Fast forward to late 2018, and we're talking about 26 Americans and 13 Canadians experiencing similar issues: nausea, hearing loss, vertigo, nosebleeds, and problems focusing. What's really bizarre is that every single one of these people claimed their symptoms started after hearing a strange noise in their homes or hotel rooms. One person said the noise was high-pitched, another described it as a beam of sound pointed into their rooms, and some said it sounded like marbles rolling on the floor. Medical experts from the University of Pennsylvania examined some of the victims and found concussion-like symptoms, but no actual concussions. Is the Cuban government behind this? Well, the Cubans have strongly denied any involvement, and a lot of American investigators believe them. They still don't have a clue who or what is making these people sick. There's also a theory about ultrasound. Some believe that maybe Cuban agents placed 2 covert eavesdropping devices too close together, causing a reaction similar to microphone feedback. But the FBI hasn't found any evidence to support this theory. An ultrasound is actually above the range of human hearing. To make things even more confusing, recordings of the sounds were studied by scientists, and two of them think the recordings captured the sound of lovelorn male crickets. Alexander Stubbs from the University of California, Berkeley, pointed out that these insects are incredibly loud. You can hear them from inside a diesel truck going 40 miles an hour on the highway, he said. But that still doesn't explain why these sounds would make people sick. Maybe it was just nerves? Cuba is a high-threat, high-stress post, a former embassy official told ProPublica.org. Diplomats are warned that there will be surveillance. There will be listening devices in your house, probably in your car. For some people, that puts them in a high-stress mentality, in a threat anticipation mode. That could be true. But then, how do you explain what happened in China? In May 2018, an American at the consulate in Guangzhou was diagnosed with the same mysterious illness. In the end, 15 Americans had to be evacuated from China. The cause of these brain injuries is still a mystery, but the consequences are crystal clear. The U.S. pulled 60% of their diplomats from Cuba and kicked 15 Cuban diplomats out of Washington, D.C. These strange sounds could very well be the first shots fired in a new kind of Cold War. While these mysteries are perplexing, there's hope that science will eventually give us the answers we need.
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
From 1917 to 1928, 500,000 people experienced a condition so terrifying it could be straight out of a horror movie. Imagine being fully conscious but unable to move, trapped in your own body. This was the reality for the victims of encephalitis lethargica, also known as the sleeping sickness. It first emerged in Europe and spread rapidly, reaching epidemic levels in North America, Europe, and India by 1919. Tragically, about a third of those affected died. Of the survivors, nearly half ended up in a state where they could not physically interact with the world around them, despite being fully aware of their surroundings. Occasionally they could speak, move their eyes, or even laugh, but mostly they remained motionless for hours, days, weeks, or even years. The cause of this dreadful condition remains a mystery. One theory suggests it might be due to brain inflammation triggered by a rare strain of Streptococcus, the bacteria that causes many sore throats. It's believed that this bacteria mutated, causing the immune system to mistakenly attack the brain, leaving the victim utterly helpless. But here's the really baffling part. The illness vanished almost as mysteriously as it appeared, only to resurface sporadically. For instance, it re-emerged in Europe in the 1950s, and more recently, about 10 years ago, a 12-year-old girl in China was hospitalized for 5 weeks with the disease. These sporadic occurrences raise the unsettling question: could encephalitis lethargica make a large-scale comeback? A 2004 analysis of 20 patients with symptoms strikingly similar to encephalitis lethargica concluded that the condition is still prevalent. This finding suggests that what seemed like a nightmare from the past could still be lurking around us. The so-called sleeping sickness of history remains a haunting mystery, leaving us to wonder if and when it might strike again.
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
Hey, have you ever heard about Area 51? It's this super secretive U.S. military base located in southern Nevada. For the longest time, its very existence was shrouded in mystery. It wasn't until 2013 that the CIA had to come clean about it due to a Freedom of Information Act request from way back in 2005. So, what's the deal with Area 51? Well, if you look at the historical evidence, it seems like the base is primarily used for developing and testing experimental aircraft and weapons. The U-2 spy plane, for instance, was tested there back in the 1950s. The SR-71 Blackbird and the stealth fighter F-117 Nighthawk were also part of the projects tested in this secluded location. They needed a secret spot away from prying eyes to experiment with these advanced technologies, and the vast desert of Nevada provided the perfect cover. However, if you are hoping to catch a glimpse of what's going on there through public satellite images on Google Maps, you're out of luck. They don't show anything useful. The images are either too blurry or strategically altered to keep things under wraps. Even the people who are allowed to visit Area 51 aren't given the full picture. They're flown in from Las Vegas on these unmarked planes operated by an airline called Janet. And get this, the windows are covered up when the planes descend, so no one can see where they're landing or what's around. These flights are so secretive that even spotting one in the sky sparks curiosity among aviation enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists. All this secrecy has, of course, led to a ton of rumors and conspiracy theories. Some folks think the government is hiding crashed UFOs and even conducting tests on aliens there. This idea really took off after an alleged incident in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, where a UFO supposedly crashed. People believe the wreckage and possibly even the extraterrestrial beings were brought to Area 51 for examination. Others have even wilder ideas. Research on time travel, teleportation experiments, meetings with extraterrestrials, weather control, and activities tied to a supposed shadowy one-world government. The theories are endless and often outlandish. For example, there are claims that the government is developing time machines or teleportation devices that could revolutionize transportation and warfare. Some think scientists at Area 51 are working on ways to control the weather, possibly for military purposes or to combat climate change. Where do these theories come from? That's as big a mystery as Area 51 itself. But one thing's for sure, people love a good conspiracy theory. The allure of the unknown and the thrill of piecing together clues, no matter how tenuous, keeps these stories alive. Remember when some believed the 1969 moon landing was faked? Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The moon landing conspiracy theory was debunked many times over, yet it still captures the imagination of a segment of the population. So while we might never know everything that happens in Area 51, it certainly fuels a lot of interesting discussions and wild imaginations. The intrigue surrounding the space keeps it at the center of countless books, movies, and TV shows. It's a perfect example of how secrecy can breed speculation and how a place can become legendary simply because of what we don't know.
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
Hey, you won't believe what I recently learned about. So picture this, it's 1982, and there's this guy named Robert Marks diving in Guanabara Bay, Brazil. Now usually you might expect to find some junk there, but what Marks found was totally out of this world. So get this. In an area underwater about the size of 3 tennis courts, about 15 miles from shore, he stumbles upon around 200 Roman ceramic jars. Can you believe it? Some of them were even fully intact. Marks, being a professional treasure hunter, knew exactly what he was looking at. These were twin-handled amphorae, the kind Romans used back in the 3rd century to transport stuff like grains and wine. But here's where it gets really wild. How the heck did these end up in Brazil? I mean, the first Europeans didn't even set foot in Brazil until 1500. That's over 1,000 years later. It's mind-boggling, right? Now you might be wondering, didn't the Romans just stick to the Mediterranean and Middle East for trading? And you'd be right, mostly. They weren't really into long ocean voyages. But get this, they did make it as far as India. So maybe, just maybe, one of their ships got seriously off course. I've been thinking about it, and I've got a couple of theories. Maybe some poor navigator got completely lost during a storm. Or here's a juicy one. What if there was a mutiny and the crew decided to head west? We might never know for sure, but it's fun to speculate, isn't it? Oh, and here's where it gets even more intriguing. In 1983, just a year after Marks made this incredible discovery, Brazil went and closed off the whole area. They said it was to stop looting, but Marks thinks there's more to it than that. He believes the government didn't want anyone digging around there because finding Roman artifacts would mess with the official story that the Portuguese were the first Europeans to reach Brazil. You know, it really makes you think about how much we still don't know about history. I mean, who knows what other surprises might be hiding out there, just waiting to be discovered. It's wild to think that something as seemingly straightforward as who reached Brazil first could potentially be turned on its head by some old jars at the bottom of the ocean. And here's a bit more info I dug up. Apparently Marks wasn't the only one to find evidence of possible pre-Columbian contact in Brazil. There have been other controversial discoveries, like inscriptions that some claim to be Phoenician. And get this, in 1976, a fisherman found a Roman coin off the coast of Venezuela. It's all pretty disputed stuff in the archaeological world, but it sure does make you wonder, doesn't it? Anyway, I just thought that was such a cool story. It's like a real-life Indiana Jones adventure, but with more questions than answers. What do you think? Could the Romans have made it to Brazil way back when, or is there some other explanation we're not thinking of?
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
Hey, did you know that nowadays about a quarter of Americans actually believe in reincarnation? It's pretty wild when you think about it. Now, I know a lot of scientists tend to dismiss this kind of thing, but every now and then, you come across a story that's so mind-blowing and hard to explain that it makes even the skeptics scratch their heads. Let me tell you about the Pollock Sisters. It's a crazy story that happened back in the 1950s. So in 1957, there were these two English girls, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock. Joanna was 11 and Jacqueline was 6. Tragically, they both died in a car accident. It's heartbreaking, right? But here's where it gets weird. A year later, their mom gave birth to twins, Jillian and Jennifer. Now, when these twins got old enough to talk, they started doing some really strange things. They'd ask for toys that used to belong to their dead sisters, toys they shouldn't have known anything about. They'd point out places that only Joanna and Jacqueline would have known, like their old school. And get this, there was this one time when they saw a car just sitting there, engine running, and they freaked out. They were screaming, "That car is coming to get us." It's like they were reliving the accident or something. This went on until the twins were about 5 years old, and then it started to taper off. They grew up to be normal kids after that. But man, those first few years were wild. The story got so much attention that it caught the eye of this psychologist named Dr. Ian Stevenson. He was really into studying reincarnation, spent his whole career looking into thousands of cases like this. He even wrote a book about 14 cases he thought were legit, and the Pollock sisters were one of them. Stevenson was a pretty respected guy in his field. He was born in 1918 and passed away in 2007. He was the head of the Department of Psychiatric Medicine at the University of Virginia School of Medicine for 50 years. His work was all about trying to find scientific evidence for reincarnation. Now, I'm not saying I believe in reincarnation or anything, but stories like this, they definitely make you wonder, don't they? What do you think about all this?
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
Hey, have you ever heard about the Voynich Manuscript? It's this fascinating, roughly 250-page book that's written in an entirely unknown language or writing system. What's even more intriguing is that it's been carbon dated back to the 1400s, so it's really old. The manuscript includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, which just adds to its mystery. The book is named after a Polish book dealer, Wilfrid Voynich, who bought it in 1912. Before that, its first confirmed owner was Georg Baresch, an alchemist from Prague who lived from 1585 to 1662. Baresch found the manuscript taking up space uselessly in his library and tried to figure out where it came from but had no luck. The manuscript passed through many hands over the centuries until Voynich got a hold of it. He had some interesting theories about its origins, suggesting it might have been written by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. However, there's a twist. Some people think Voynich himself might have fabricated the whole thing, along with its history. There have been various other hoax theories over the years, but these don't quite explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink, which firmly places it in the 1400s. In addition to the mysterious script and illustrations, the Voynich manuscript contains sections that seem to be about herbal medicine, astronomical charts, and possibly recipes. Some illustrations appear to show women bathing in what could be medicinal baths, suggesting that it might have been intended as a medical or alchemical text. However, without being able to read the text, it's all speculative. In recent years, some computer scientists and linguists have used AI and machine learning to try and decode the manuscript. But even these advanced techniques haven't cracked the code. Speaking of hoaxes, did you know that about 1/3 of people can't tell if photos have been manipulated? It's crazy to think about how easily we can be fooled by images these days.
As the shadows deepened and whispers of intrigue lingered in the air, one thing was certain: the next mystery was just around the corner, waiting to be unveiled.
Let me tell you about one of the most infamous criminal cases in American history. It all started on a warm June evening in 1994 in Los Angeles. Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of football legend O.J. Simpson, and her friend Ronald Goldman were brutally murdered outside Nicole's home. Picture this: it's June 12th, and Nicole's out having dinner with her kids at a local restaurant called Mezzaluna. Later that night, Ronald, who worked at the restaurant, stops by Nicole's place to drop off some glasses her mother had left behind. Meanwhile, O.J. and his friend Cato Kalin are grabbing a quick bite at McDonald's. Now, here's where things get interesting. Around 10:25 that night, OJ's limo driver shows up to take him to the airport for a red-eye flight to Chicago. OJ takes off at 11 p.m., but just over an hour later, Nicole and Ronald's bodies are discovered. Can you imagine the shock of the neighbors who found them, led there by Nicole's poor dog barking non-stop? The police arrive and find some pretty damning evidence: a bloody glove, a knit cap, and bloody footprints. When O.J. lands in Chicago, he gets the news about Nicole and heads back to L.A., where the police question him for hours. Now, get this. A few days later, on June 17th, O.J. is charged with both murders. But instead of turning himself in, he takes off in his white Ford Bronco, leading police on a slow-speed chase that had the whole country glued to their TVs. It was surreal, watching this football hero trying to evade the law on live television. What follows is a trial that captivated the nation. O.J. assembles this all-star team of lawyers. They called them the Dream Team, including big names like Robert Shapiro and Johnny Cochran. On the other side, you've got these determined prosecutors, Marcia Clark and William Hodgman, trying to prove O.J.'s guilt. The trial was like a soap opera with twists and turns that kept everyone on the edge of their seats. The defense team went after the DNA evidence hard, arguing that it couldn't be trusted. And in the end, despite what seemed like strong evidence against him, O.J. was found not guilty on October 3, 1995. You know what's crazy? To this day, no one else has ever been seriously investigated for these murders. Nicole and Ronald's killer is still out there, and their families are still waiting for justice. This case wasn't just about a celebrity on trial. It touched on so many hot-button issues in America: race, celebrity, the justice system, domestic violence. It's a story that still fascinates people nearly 30 years later, and I bet we'll be talking about it for years to come.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the unexplained. We hope these mysteries have sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to delve deeper into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop seeking the truth.